All right, this webinar is now started. Good morning, everyone. We'll give everyone a little while to connect to the session. I'm Jay Pepper-Martens, and we'll get rolling here in just a minute or two once we've got the attendees. And the next item on housekeeping is that you're going to find an outline for today's session in the chat window. So if you go to there now and click on the link, you'll actually have a document you could follow along a little on your side. I'm not going to refer specifically to the document much. I'm just going to follow that workflow. Patrick and I are going to go through some tasks and some topics today. I'm Jay Pepper-Martens, the CTO for the association. My co-presenter today is Patrick Anderson. Patrick, do you want to introduce yourself quick?
Yeah, hi everyone. So nice to see you all today. And if you've attended some of our previous sessions, you've seen me and Andrew and HUD on there before. I'm the MLS technical lead at SFAR, and I'll be talking a little bit about InfoSparks, and also Jay and I will be talking about some of the exporting features and also some of the really advanced searching techniques that you'll be experiencing in the MLS. So looking forward to getting this started.
Right on. And with that, we'll start with our first topic today. We're going to start off with advanced search techniques. And the reason why search still has to be a part of stats is when you're running statistics, you're still running it over a set of data. And this is a little different, what we're going to do today, than just searching for maybe a couple of listings to do a comparable sale. This is going to give you ranges of data where you're trying to look at everything that happened in a month or everything that happened in a quarter, or perhaps everything that happened in a year. So before we can jump right into the how to look at stats, we have to talk a little bit more about the powerful search features that are in the MLS that are not exactly obvious. So I'm sharing my screen and you can see I'm logged into the MLS system. I'm going to use a standard search for this example. And in the standard search, you've got sort of the bulk of the fields that are really common. You'll see that all of your district, sub-district information is here. The important block we're going to talk about today is statuses and status dates in combination with things like property type or selling area. So some cool stuff that's in here that you may not know. There's a little preview count feature that exists in the MLS now. It can auto-calculate on the fly for you or only preview when you want it to. So you can see here that if I do, let's just pull some active data and do an active count. Okay, now if I change my settings and move to a different control, my count doesn't update. I've got mine set to only do manual updates. So if you want that to be different, there's a setting for that where you can say you want it to recalculate when you change controls. I have mine set to manual. So this morning, you're going to see that when I make changes to my search, I go to the preview count and press the button. Your system may be set to auto-calculate, so just be aware. So starting off with some general search strategy, and Andrew did a great job covering this, but I think it's so important we should recap it. Sometimes people will ask us at the MLS why they can't find anything that's a 2-bedroom with a pool that has a spot for a motorcycle or something really hyper-specific. And what we discover when we help them is that they've gone in and put in every single one of those search criteria all together on their very first pass. And that doesn't always work. Sometimes you'll end up including an attribute that has no data or isn't valid or for some reason doesn't work in combination with something else you're doing. So when you're doing searching, always start with the widest possible result set, the biggest funnel, and add criteria until you get it really narrowed down. And so an example here is going to be, I've got residential. I want everything in the city. So I'm going to put in San Francisco here. And maybe I want everything that's been active since the first of the month. So I'm going to go 01/05/22 and I hit preview count. Okay, so there's 1,100 listings. That's too many for what we want because my client really wants a 2-bedroom with a pool or something like that. So now we're going to start adding more criteria. I'm going to start adding in the bedrooms from 2 to maybe they don't need more than 3. So we're going to limit it at 3. That's inclusive. So 2 to 3 will include 2 and 3. And then let's refine that first of all. Less data. Great. Now we're going to use the additional features at the top. Go to the very top, additional criteria, and I'm going to look for the keyword pool. To find pools, I'm just going to use the built-in browser search, Control F.
May I interrupt real quick?
Oh yeah, certainly.
There's a request. If you could zoom in a little bit on your screen, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Sure thing. Let's try that. So just to back up where I was, again, I was on general criteria. I'm going to switch to additional criteria and find the pool field because they want a 2 or 3 bedroom with a pool. and in the city. So we'll see what we find. So I said it has to have pool, yes, and I want to include listings. That's why I've turned on the include checkbox. And now when I preview count, there are 60 listings available. So now I've got my very specific search. But if I had maybe put something else in also that didn't work with that, maybe I had also added something where maybe something that's not very well populated. So green verification rating, or I think leads is one of them. So if I said it must include those two and I turn it on, and now I have 0. So you might think that there's no data in the database, but what it was is I've accidentally put in a criteria that in combination with my criteria that does work generated 0 results. So just remember, start with a broad search when you're envisioning how to get down to something very specific. And then you can drill down by adding criteria layer by layer. In combination with preview count, this lets you make really targeted searches accurately without generating results that don't seem to make any sense. And that is breadth versus depth search first. Okay, so now I want to go back to the original standard search, and I want to talk about using these date and status checkboxes in combination to do some really surprising and powerful stuff. So again, we've got it set to residential. Let's take out, sorry, let's make sure we cleared out that pool. Make sure that's not there. Okay, great, it's not. So we're gonna do residential in the city of San Francisco. And we're gonna do something really obvious. I've got like the actives checked, and so I get back all 1,259 active listings that are in the city limits. Great. But, and you just saw before that I was able to say, only show me ones that have been active since May 1st. So that works. I can do that. And this is going to be less because obviously there were some listings that were active prior to that date. Maybe I also want to include coming soon. So you know how these things work, the basic controls like that. But check this out. A common analysis that you might want to do is looking at data in a period of time in the past and see what happened to it. For example, maybe it's valid to look at how many listings were active in September of last year and see if how many of those sold versus how many of those went to some other status. So watch what I'm going to do. Instead of turning on the checkbox for active, I'm only going to use the date control. And I'm going to say to myself, show me everything that was active between, why don't we use July 1st of last year, July, August, September. So let's go to September 30th of last year. And I'm not going to put a checkbox. And it's going to generate a data result for me. And so what this tells me is that for that quarter, that would be Q3 last year, there were, for that period of time, 2,639 active listings in the city of San Francisco, meaning either they were active starting before that time and had active during it, or they came active in that time and went out to some other status. Let's run the search and see what we get. And you know, when I try to run this, it's going to tell me that I have too many results. See how it says I only, my maximum is 1,000. So now I have to add further criteria. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to limit it to just District 5. And let's change the count or run the count again, 388. So now we're saying, show me all the listings that were active in Q3 in Glen Park, Noe Valley, District 5 in the city between those dates. Let's take a look at our results. Cool. So what I love about this is it pulled the data that was active then and shows me the status now. So you can see my, what is it, 8th or 10th column. There are a couple that are still active. There's some that were put on hold. The rest are closed. And I can now look at what happened to all of that data. So I could also do things like compare the data from Q1 last year to Q1 of this year by doing this kind of a search. And if I wanted to, I could group on the status. So I'm going to pull that up into my top here. And if you've never seen that feature before, that allows you to choose a field that's in your grid that you want to group your data by. And I'm going to use status. I just grab it and I drag it up here. And now I can see them by group. So I don't care about the actives. Let's go to the ones that were canceled. Okay, great. Let's see what some other ones are here. Some canceled ones, some closed ones. There's going to be a lot of closed data, and that would be normal, right? We would consider that the normal life cycle of a listing. some duplicate cancels and some expireds, some holds, and some of them that were on market at that time have now sold off the MLS. So now you can do some analysis, right? You can say to yourself, well, in what districts did they mostly sell off the MLS? And you can see that Diamond Street appears there once. And so you could group by sub-districts even and have a look at which ones seem to be predominantly trending toward what kind of closing. It lets you do one type of analysis.
Okay, we have a question related to searching from Neil I'd like to bring up. His question is there a way to show search for factors? Like I had a price change during a period of multiple price changes. So his question is, want to show search for factors, if I'm understanding it correctly, Neil.
Okay.
And I could unmute you if you'd like to speak to the question. Do you understand what he's asking, Jay?
I think he's asking about things like price increases and reductions. And so that's a search. I'm going to show how that works too.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And if I don't quite nail it, let's make sure that we do get the question re-asked. So instead of doing a standard search, I'm actually going to use what's called a hot sheet search. And so to your point exactly, instead of me looking at the basic attributes of a listing, now I'm looking for things like how many listings have had a price increase or decrease in a certain period. So let's check that out. Let's check out price fluctuations, either increases or decreases that have happened in the last 3 days. So you can see I'm using the days back control here. You could specify a date range. I'm going to use the days back control. Usually when you're doing hot sheet searches, you're looking at things that have happened in the last 24, 48, 72, that kind of thing. This does max out at 21 days, but you could do as much as a week. So why don't we do that for the example? Let's do a week of data, looking at any price fluctuations inside the residential market. So I'm going to include all my subtypes, and I only want to look at things in the city. Again, I work in the city, so I'm only going to look at the data in the city. And I would like to see, I don't care about the status. I just want to see where it's been price increase or reductions, which means sometimes if a price was reduced 6 days ago and closed 2 days later, I mean, it's going to show up here as a closed transaction. So watch this. Preview count, make sure I got some data. I do. View my results. There we go. So it's grouped by change type for me because it could tell that I'm running a hot sheet search and that I probably want to group by my change type. And of course, I only have the 2 change types that I specified. I have my increases and my decreases. And so now you can analyze these and you can see some status information. So these are all happen to be active. There's one that's contingent show that had a price fluctuation in the last week where it's now gone into a contingent status. So again, this lets you sort of dig into your data and really analyze what's happening. Now, maybe price fluctuations are particularly important to me and I want to save this. Well, you can save this hot sheet just like you can save any other search. So in this case, I'm going to save it as a hot sheet search. I'm going to save it as price fluctuation. And I'm going to click more because I also want to schedule this as an email to myself, and you can go through all that stuff. You've seen that in previous examples of our webinar. So when you go to save it, you can either just save it as one you can run manually, or you could schedule it. I'm not going to do either right now. So let's make sure that question's answered before we go on to some of our stats products.
Yeah, so Neil followed up with, can we see that price increase, decrease historically along with sold status? So Jay, we talked about days back, for example, in the hot sheet. Can we do, for example, a custom date range? And would that maybe include a status of some sort?
Let's go ahead and do an example. So let's maybe use quarter or January of this year. So let's do a nice easy 01/01/22, and we'll start at 001 because it lets me do as accurate as time. And I'm going to go changes through to the end of January. I think there's 31 days in that month. And we're going to go right up until 11:59 p.m. to make sure we get everything from that inside that day. And we're going to look at price increases and decreases. And we're going to preview count. What do we have? So because I want to specify more than 21 days, you can see I'm getting a warning. So what I could do is I could break it into a couple of weeks, right? So one of my strategy might be that I'm going to do from the 1st to the 15th, and then I'm going to do from the 16th on. Let's do that as an example. I've got 10 fluctuations in the first 2 weeks. So I could run that set of results. I could run those results and put them in a folder. So check this out. If you haven't seen this technique before, I could say, this is the first half of that January. I'm going to create a folder for it. I'm going to call it January price flux. I'm going to save it. Great, so it added those, and then I'm going to revise my criteria, and I'm just going to move my dates over like I had said. We'll do 16th through to the end of the month. Now I'm inside my 21-day limit. I'm going to view those results. And because I wished I could get it all together, but I couldn't, I'm going to put these in the same folder. I'm going to add to folder, add to existing folder. I'm going to choose my January price fluxes. I'm going to add it. Now I've got that data pulled. So I can go and refer to it whenever I want. I can go to my folders and I can say, let me see my price fluxes, and it put them all together for me in a single place where I can now look at them. I could maybe analyze them one by one. I could export them. I could do a bunch of things with it. Let's check and see that that answers the gentleman's question.
Yeah, I think also, Jay, if we could go back to that revise search criteria in the hot sheet, if there's a way to search by statuses as well, I believe there is a way to narrow it down, maybe to closed listings, if that's possible.
You bet. Yep, you could look at just closed listings, and maybe you only want to see the ones where it closed, where there was a price reduction in it. So, you can combine these things together to really get analytical. And this is one of the things that's magic about the MLS system that I think is not obvious, is underneath the hood, there's a full-on analytical database at your disposal here. You just have to learn how to massage these controls a little bit to turn it from, a very economical little MLS engine into a sports car engine MLS system. And now that we have data that not only is just the city, but we actually do have data, you could redo all of these same things. You could do Marin, you could do San Mateo County. You have no limitations in the entire database. So if you learn how to use these controls in combination and set yourself some repeatable searches or schedule them to email you, you can turn this thing into a high performance engine to send you analytical information all the time. Well, now that I've got some data pulled, I could do something interesting with it. I'm going to go back and do what I was doing before, where I said, give me all the data that was active during a period of time. I'm going to do everything that was active this year so far till now. So if it's ever been active in 2022, oh, that's way too much. So obviously I've got to pare it down again, right? Let's just do San Francisco, or I could have just put in District 5, actually would have been fine too. That'll narrow my data set. So now that I have a result set that I care about, what if I did want to just run some aggregate stats on all of these listings and find anything out about them? So to look at the built-in stats tools, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Patrick, and I'm just going to do some double checking on my side in the background while Patrick talks about the built-in stats tools. Do you want to share this?
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right. Does everyone see the MLS additional criteria on my screen?
Yeah, looks good, Patrick. Maybe let's zoom in a little right now so that
yeah, thank you. Thanks for reminding me. Okay, so let's zoom in here. Nice and large text. In case anyone would like to know in the future how to zoom in on Windows, it's Control and then the equals or plus key. And then on Mac, it's, I believe, Command and then the equals or plus key. So you can zoom in on your MLS. So I'm going to go back to the standard search in the MLS. We're going to move away from hot sheets back to standard. And Jay has given us a fantastic groundwork to understand some of the ways that we can search more specifically for our listings in the MLS. And right now I'll be talking about how we can use that to our advantage. First in the MLS, using the MLS's statistics button at the top here, and then also in InfoSparks. And so I'm going to start off with a very simple search. So as you can see here, I have automatically set my default standard search to include the county of San Francisco, just because I'm primarily interested in San Francisco listings, although you can absolutely see the other listings from our NorCal Alliance partners in the SFAR MLS system by changing the county to, for example, maybe a Berries County like Napa, for example. You can see those listings in the SFAR MLS. But let's start with San Francisco. I'm going to search for residential listings, and I'll do condominiums just to narrow it down a bit. So as Jay talked about in the beginning, Jay had his preview count set to manual updates, but mine is automatic. So as soon as I select and modify the search criteria, I'm seeing that there are 839 active condominiums in San Francisco. So if I want to just go ahead and run some statistics on this search, I can either click on the statistics here, or I can either go to the search itself with either the view results link or this search button here. So let's go ahead and search. So as you can see, I have all 839 listings that the preview count identified. They're all active. I can see the price changes over here in the list sell price. I can see the listing numbers. And now, if I want to get some statistics on this, last session we talked about some of the CMA reports we can see and get some of those fast report statistics. I'm going to go ahead and click on this statistics button right here. So let's click on this. And what pulls up, and this might be slightly different for you based on your settings, is a statistical summary of all 839 of those listings that I pulled up in my search. The first module I'm going to point out here is the setting in the top right corner that allows me to see either statistics only, charts only, or both statistics and charts. So I'll briefly show you what that looks like. So charts only, you select that and you get a more visual view of the statistics. If you do statistics only, you see a more numeric view of it. And if you see the statistics and charts, you'll see both. And so this star on the right here, this is to essentially tell the system your preferred setting. I prefer statistics only, so we'll be working with that today. I prefer the more numeric approach to these listings. And so let's take a look at some of these statistical summaries and see what we have going here. So the first thing you'll notice is that the criteria is laid out for me in case, for example, maybe I forgot what my search criteria was, or maybe it was a very complex search and I just want to remind myself what exactly I was searching for. In this case, it's a fairly simple search criteria. It's just condos, active condos in San Francisco. I see the counts of statuses, and in this case, because my status is active, all of the listings are going to be inactive. But of course, if you include more statuses such as pending, closed, or maybe a less used one, a less common one, such as maybe duplicate canceled or something, you'll see the other increase with those listings. And you can always go back to the list and see which specifically those listings were. So let's move down the page and we see aggregate statistics. Now, this is an important set of data that we'll get into further with InfoSparks as well, but this generally shows us some of the key points of data that agents typically look for when they're running some sort of comparison between the listings in the market now, or perhaps a summary of the historic fluctuations in the market in the past. So as you can see, just going down the list, we see, for example, let's start with bedrooms. You see the minimum, so the minimum bedroom count is 0. It's unsurprising. For example, is a large search criteria that included perhaps studios. There's an average, so you can see that in general, the listings on the condos in the market are showing an average of 2 bedrooms, a maximum of 5 bedrooms for condos. That might be bigger for example, a single family residence search. And then the same goes for bathrooms. You see those same statistics for the bathroom counts. Going to square feet, this might be an interesting one as well. You'll see the average square feet of active listings in the market. So perhaps maybe you're running historical searches. You can see maybe some of the changes and averages of square feet over time, or maybe the changes of list price. For example, you might see maybe a change of list price over time using some of your searches. And then of course you have, skipping ahead here, the days on market, and then the cumulative days on market. And so Jay, do you want to maybe elaborate what the difference is between days on market and cumulative days on market?
Yes, that sounds like a good idea if I unmute my microphone first even to explain it. So your days on market is going to reflect all of your on-market active statuses. Basically, this is how many days was it on the public market. The cumulative days on market is going to continue to count days for periods in between when it's in the MLS system, but not visible on a market system. So imagine that you have put your listing into a held status. Maybe you're doing some work. You don't want the public days on market to accrue while you're doing some work on it, and you're not showing it for that period because it's held. So that would accumulate CDOM, but wouldn't accumulate days on market. The days on market is what the public sees. The cumulative days on market is an internal metric that is really just meant for agents to communicate with agents, so that when you go in and look at the grid of data and you can see that the DOM and the CDOM are different, you'll know that the listing has gone on the market and then been pulled for a little bit and then put back on the market. And agents were figuring this out anyway using property history. So it's not like we've uncovered some secret that was really well hidden. It just, instead of people having to dig through property history, now they're able to just see CDOM as a statistic in the MLS. And I'm going to say that again, in the MLS. So that data is not transmitted to our partners. It is not transmitted in data feeds. It's just for use inside the system when agents are looking at agent data with one another's listings.
Thanks, Jay. And I'll absolutely say that for the most part, my personal experience is that the DOM and the CDOM for most listings is relatively similar, and we can see that the averages between the two are very similar. Of course, the CDOM naturally is going to be slightly higher than the days on market. And let's see here. So back to the reports or the statistics, what I'll just wrap up with real quick is that there are a number of reports that many agents find appeal using that are different than, say, the standard reports you see from the search result page. And so from here, you'll see this reports button. If I go back to the standard search, you'll also see a reports button, but these two are actually different. This reports button, if I click on it, actually goes to some of our enhanced reports and our standard reports, such as the agent detail report or the client detail one. If we run the statistics and we click on the reports button from here, this actually takes us to a statistical reports page. And so the first report we'll see here is a area market survey by area. And there's a number here. A common report that I see asked in the support channel is a ranking report that shows per time basis. So I'll show you real quick the area market survey by area. I'll select that, hit submit, and what we see is, generally speaking, a breakdown of the SF districts. So SF District 1, SF District 2, it shows the quantity at various price buckets. It shows the averages, the min, max, median. It shows the days on market. And then once again, it shows you your criteria. So I invite you to play around with some of these reports. We won't get into all of them just for the sake of time, but there's a number of these reports that you can either take away, you can download it off the MLS, or perhaps send to someone over email. So with that, are there any other questions? Is there a way to search residential income properties by price per unit? So let's go ahead and try that. So
you know what? You're going to find out that there's not. And when you get to that conclusion, we'll actually pick this up in the export section at the end.
Perfect.
Go ahead and give it a shot. Go ahead and
okay. Yeah, so let's give it a shot. And if we have some difficulty, let's talk about the export. So is there a way to search residential income property? And by the way, this is recorded. This will be posted on our YouTube channel, and let's put a link in the chat for our YouTube channel. We've had some of our previous sessions, MLS 101, MLS 102, recorded and put on our YouTube channel. Those are some of the more essential core educational tools that we've begun presenting, and Jay and I are talking about some of the more advanced functionality of the MLS. So I invite you to check out the YouTube channel. So back to the residential income properties by price per unit. So let's go ahead and first select residential income. We'll just limit it by counties. We'll just do active, and let's just go ahead and we see 205 listings. Let's view the results. Okay, so we have our one-line grid. And the first thing we want to talk about is that in general, for any numeric column that we see, for example, days on market, you're always able to sort a search by either ascending or descending order of the numeric column. So for days on market, if I once again click on it, we start off with all the zeros, we go to ones, and the numbers are ascending. And if we switch the order, if we click on this again, it's descending order. And so in general, if there was a price per unit field in our one line grid, you could simply click on the column and you could sort it by price per unit. And so what I'll say here for the sake of time is that there are a broad swath of fields that you can search by and sort by in the one line grid using this customize grid button here. If you click on this, you're taken to a somewhat dense but comprehensive search box of all the available residential fields in our MLS. And so I invite you, Richard, or maybe you can spend some time after talking about which field we want to find for price per unit. And then what you'd essentially do is select that field. I'm in residential now, but we want to go to residential income. And we select that field, add it. We could move it to the top here or move it from the bottom to the top using this move up field. Save this, go back, and that field's there. But you know, for now, I encourage you to take a look at all those fields and let's talk about this offline. You know, Andrew and myself were in the MLS support queue on a regular basis, the SFAR, the MLS at sfrealtors.com email address. So let's talk about this further. So with that, do we want to move on to InfoSparks?
Yeah, why don't you do that? And then we'll come back to exports and we'll pick up this example when we get there. Go ahead.
Great. Okay, so all of this is in the MLS. It's within the MLS system. And so you can do all the searching, you can do all the statistics, you can do all the reports in the MLS system. But of course, the MLS system is one tile on the MLS dashboard. And so as you can see here, here's the dashboard, here's the tile for the MLS. If I click on it, I go to the MLS. But also there's this tile here for InfoSparks. And if you've been to one of our sessions before, you've seen us talk about InfoSparks in previous sessions. It's also in our YouTube channel on one of our MLS, I believe, 102 sessions. InfoSparks is a fantastic way to do very many of the searches we did in the MLS at a much faster rate. And so, you know, Jay and I have been talking about how to search for listings based on either maybe on market date or maybe a status or a listing price indicator. So InfoSparks does a great way of bundling up all those criteria and putting them into very convenient buttons at the bottom here that you can instantly run a search for in InfoSparks. And so what we're seeing here is we're seeing all of the residential listings in San Francisco County of all price ranges. And we're seeing the median sales price of all of those listings in this nice, convenient 3 months average graph over the past 3 years. We can go ahead and immediately change that to, instead of a median, an average of those same listings, or we can go to an entirely different criteria such as price per square feet. So there's a number of these different criteria. There's month supply, there's days on market, there's the number of sold listings. And so this is showing all of the criteria in all of San Francisco County for all residential listings in all of our NorCal Alliance partners MLSs. If you wanted to see perhaps what the listing volume is for just Barry's agent listings in San Francisco, you could go ahead and select that. There's not very many because for the most part, people are operating in an SFAR MLS, but we could say MLS listings, there might be a few more. So what we could also do, go back to all source MLSs, is we have this San Francisco County graph right here. Say we wanted to overlay all of the sold listings in San Francisco. with a graph that shows all of the sold listings in a particular district within San Francisco. What you could do is, if you select add an area here, I'm going to select add an area, it puts a second line graph in the graph here, as you can see by the different colors, because they're completely identical. They're going to be overlaid with each other, but let me change that area to an SF district. I can do SF district, I could do sub-district, or I could do an entirely different county if I wanted to see how San Francisco is performing with another county. But let's do SF District 5. And what you can see in sold listings is there's, of course, less volume for District 5, this purple graph, than there are sold listings in the entire San Francisco County. And so I'm going to take a pause here and answer a question in our Q&A section. Can you explain the default 3-month average tab? Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a look at that tab. The 3 months here. This is essentially telling us, I'll say just from a broad perspective, it's essentially telling us how smooth of a graph we want to present to ourselves or to whoever we're presenting, how smooth of a graph we want this to be. And so what does that mean? That means how specific each of these individual data points are. So, you know, in our timeline here, we have 3 years of data. And if I scroll down to each data point, it shows January 2019, February 2019, March 2019, et cetera. So it's, as you can see, it's a per month data point, but in fact, because we have it set to 3 months, this is more or less an average of the last 3 months of listing data is actually bundled up and averaged into this individual data point to provide a general idea, understanding of the trend of the sold listings in the market, and not just an individual snapshot of a point in time in, for example, May 2019. But we can absolutely change that to an individual snapshot. If we select monthly, then this data point right here, May 2019, will actually genuinely be the statistic of sold listings within the month of May 2019. If we go to rolling 12 months, as you can see, it's a much smoother line because we're actually taking a 12-month average leading up to May 2019 of the sold listings in the MLS. So hopefully that answers your question.
Maybe the underlying question is, why would you care? So 3 months is sort of the generally accepted mechanism for looking at trend graphs. 12 months is going to give you the really big picture. And then if you want to zoom in and microscope it, you're going to switch it to be the monthly one that Patrick showed you so that it's just single data points. And now you're looking at accurate numbers per data point. So this gets you a pretty jagged line, which sometimes isn't very helpful. The other place that this is really handy to use is, imagine you're just looking at data in a sub-district where there's not a lot of data. Why don't we add another third line, Patrick, for something like, what about Forest Hills is one of our districts, right? Let's see if we can find Forest Hills in one of our sub-districts. You might even be able to auto-complete it if you just start typing.
Yeah, let's try that. Forest Hill SF
Forest
sub-district.
Hill.
Perfect.
There we go. Great. So Forest Hill has got some zeros in it. So because it's got zeros, monthly looks like a pretty nonsense line. Get rid of the San Francisco County one. There you go. So we're just looking at Forest Hill. Monthly, it doesn't tell us much, but you start to roll the average, and now you're getting a much more clearer picture what the trend is. So it swoops down and then comes back up, and you never have to worry about it sort of bottoming out in your data. Just a way you can do analysis.
Yeah, and to Jay's point, we selected Forest Hill. It's a sub-district, so it's a very, very small representation of the overall market. And so in general, small snapshots of areas, you'll see in general more jagged, more volatile trends than you would, for example, for San Francisco County, which is it's a much more clear trend of the market. And I'll go ahead and show you again. San Francisco, you can see a clear trend. It's very smooth over the changing sold listings over the past 12 months. Okay, so regardless of what statistics you find useful to yourself at any given point in time, what you want to do eventually is find a way to share these reports either to yourself or to the other people you're working with. And so let's go ahead and in this top bar here, let's go ahead and click on reports. First of all, from this reports page, you're going to actually be able to, for the most part, delegate all this work that you're doing in this main InfoSparks page, all the fine tuning with the smoothing of the line, the trend that you're looking for. You're going to actually be able to delegate that using this reports button and actually take advantage of InfoSparks built-in reports, either for example, a given area, or maybe a monthly indicator, or just a comprehensive annual report. So let's start with the annual report. We'll go ahead and do 2021. I'll select 2021 and view the report. So we start off with a nice cover page here, a general analysis, an expert analysis of the trend in the market that we're seeing from InfoSparks, and then some quick statistics using several of the choices that you're presented with in this bottom row here. And so we have the new listings, pending sales, sold listings, active listings, and then you can just keep scrolling down. We see all of those statistics and bar graphs. We see the percent changes, top 5 areas. We see some of the graphs we're looking at. Again, these are using, as we were talking about just then, a 12-month average for each data point. So you'll see that these trends are relatively smooth here. And so this is a really quick way. I mean, if we just start from the dashboard, go to InfoSparks, go to reports, and then the annual report. In just about a few clicks, you have this entire analysis of the general trend of the market in San Francisco. So it's a really fast way to do that.
Oh, that's wild. 5 clicks and you're all the way into the annual report. You could have picked a monthly indicator and done everything for like D5 or D8 or something.
Right.
Cool.
Super quick. And you can take all of this information that Jay and I are presenting to you and fully understand what this report's talking about without having to do all the legwork to achieve it. So there's also local market updates. So you can select an individual district, District 2, for example, or for example, a sub-district in a district. And so that, as you saw there were 2 ways I accomplished that. The first is I can select the area from this drop down, but also I can use this interactive map and just click on the sub-district and I'm taken directly to that report. Okay.
So quick question myself. Yeah. We've been focusing a lot on San Francisco data. We also mentioned in sort of the summary of this class that you now have the ability with the super regional data to do these same type of reports in multiple areas. Is that something that you can save, or could you give us an example of how to say search for properties or stats outside of our county?
Absolutely. Thanks, Hud. So by default, this area is going to show San Francisco County. And we've been doing a lot of searches to overlay San Francisco County with, for example, an area or a sub-district. But what if I wanted to compare San Francisco County to a different county, maybe even one that San Francisco, the SFARMLS typically hasn't perhaps represented as our territory, maybe Barry's, for example. Let's take a look at maybe Marin, or let's do Alameda County. So let's select Alameda County. And what we see here is we see also quite a significant number of listings in the same time period as our listing counts for San Francisco. So how does that happen despite being in the San Francisco MLS? Well, the answer is because of our NorCal Alliance with our 6 other association partners, we're able to ingest that data from the Paragon system of Alameda counties and show it directly in InfoSparks using the SFAR dashboard. So this is a fantastic way to see all of those listings. Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the real time scenarios here is many of our realtors work in San Francisco and other areas. They're ultimately trying to help their client do whatever they need to do, whether it's downsizing or upsizing. And so oftentimes they're moving from San Francisco to Alameda. This is a quick way to show the market trends. Thanks for showing that, Patrick. And I assume that we can email that or print it or share it in multiple ways with our client if we need to.
Yes, we can. So let's let's wrap up this part on InfoSparks, and then we'll move on to exports back in the MLS with Jay. Let's wrap this up with the print and share buttons here. And so let's not focus too much on the use case of this graph here. Let's just focus on how we get this out in the hands of our clients or associates. So we have these two buttons here, print and share. So let's start with print. Print, super simple way to get a PDF of this graph right here. So it's showing the sold listings, it's showing the regions that we're working with, and it shows the average over the past 3 years of that search criteria. And you can go ahead and either save that, you can save it as file type on your computer, you can print it out, you can even annotate it depending on which browser or which PDF reader you're using. But this is, in just one click, I'm able to get a PDF. What I can also do is, this is automatically taking me to the share option, but I'll go ahead and close this and start from scratch. If you click on the share button here, you're taken to a module of a few options. The first one, step one, what type of data would you like to share? So this is an interesting one because right now we're seeing static, but if we go to live, what this does is it actually updates the data based on incoming information, say over a period of time, say you share this option and then a few months later, you come back to it, it's going to update with the latest data that might have changed over that time period. The second thing is that how would you like to share it? You can do PDF, that's the one we just did. There's also social media and email. There's an embed, that's essentially like maybe a piece of JavaScript for if you're creating a website, you can throw the JavaScript, the HTML into your website.
Or just ask your developer what they want.
Right, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Just tell them embed and see if their ears perk up, Otherwise, there's CSV, and so this is very similar to what we're going into soon with the reports, but let's just do social media and email. So we'll do share. Here's the URL. This is once again, because we're doing a live updated real-time InfoSparks search. If we take this URL, we can go ahead and go to our mail application of choice, and we can actually send this link to someone, and I'll show you.
Actually, Patrick,
you could drop in the chat.
Yeah, drop it in the chat.
Good.
So people can see it in real time.
So let's put this in the chat. And you can go ahead and click on that, and you'll see this exact search that we're looking at together on my screen. So
I can see using this in a couple, and it just struck me that we all have different signatures in our email, with our email clients. Oftentimes people are using this as a branding opportunity to either talk about their listings or talking about, a service that they're using. You might put in a signature like, District 5 stats, and in your email signature, anytime someone gets an email, they can click on that and see that. But the fact that it's real time is fantastic, which means it's going to update, in real time.
Yeah, and I'll say, HUD, this is a great way to mark some of the data that you're seeing in the MLS. It has our logo on the top. You can make your clients feel comfortable knowing that this is directly from the MLS. And I'll say from firsthand experience that InfoSparks, the data that they use for these reports is fantastic. I've run the same searches in the MLS that InfoSparks runs in this application, for example, new listings, and I get the results that InfoSparks is showing us here. And so it's a very trustworthy and reliable source of information for yourself and for clients. And once again, as HUD said, there's that branding that we have here for the SFAR. So with that, I'll turn it over back to Jay, and we'll talk about how to export listings in the MLS.
Cool. Awesome. Great job, Patrick. The last thing I'm going to do before we step away from InfoSparks, I'm going to show you this example I built because I was really working on a real problem where someone said, I want to compare the data in Santa Rosa to Pleasanton. How do I do that? Well, those aren't counties. Those are specific areas within counties. So what I did was I went to My Areas, which was one of the tools on the top. In here now, what I wanted to do was make sure that I had defined something that sort of describes the area. So I'm going to go over to where I find Pleasanton. Let's see, what did I do here? So I drew a polygon manually that was all of Pleasanton and, part of Concord and Walnut Creek. That was in one area where the client was thinking about buying. And they were like, well, is it cheaper or more expensive than just living in Santa Rosa? And I mean, travel commute costs aside, I was just looking at housing costs. So I also built a polygon using these little built-in tools at the top. We won't go through it today, but you can see that I was able to build a polygon that covers one area and a polygon that covers the other area. And then on my InfoSparks tab, just like I was able to pick counties, I could also pick my areas, and I was able to compare Concord with Pleasanton, Walnut Creek, and I could compare that directly to Santa Rosa. So again, a lot of power in here. Bang, there I go, same graph, same detailed data, but now I'm just comparing the metro area of Santa Rosa and the metro area of Pleasanton, Concord, Walnut Creek. Super powerful tool. So let's jump back into the MLS, and I want to go back to the gentleman's question that he had around residential income. And then I want to show you some strategies using export that might help you work with this data. So I'm going to pick the residential income type, and I'm going to say, give me anything that's active, and I'm not going to limit it. I'm just going to look at how many I've got. Wow, too many. Okay, so maybe I do just want counties of San Francisco, and you know what, let's also do San Mateo. Maybe there's some in San Mateo. Great, so that's a more limited data set. And the question was around sorting or searching on unit cost. And that's not really possible, but here's what you can do. I'm going to generate a set of results. There we go. And in this data, I know that there are fields that describe the price per unit. So if I go to the residential income and I look for, unit 4, what is it called? Unit 4 price, rent source, that sort of thing. So I know how much the units are going to cost when they're renting out inside this residential income property. So what I could do is I could go back to my grid, and I'm going to take advantage of a feature in the MLS called exports. I want to preface this with a couple of things. One of them is we are currently evaluating all of our export formats. Most of them are legacy, with the exception of the one I will show you today. So we are going to start updating these in more common sets of export formats. But for today's example, we're going to use Realty Tools Without Photos, which is a very reliable, sort of comprehensive, it's got most of the fields in it, export set. And so if I use this export set and I submit it, and what am I submitting? I'm submitting every listing that I've checked using this check control to the export control, and it's saying I'm going to export it out without photos using this Realty Tools column format. And when I click submit, it says, hi, here's a file. And this can be a little intimidating. I totally get that, some people aren't used to looking at zip files, but if I save this file somewhere on my computer, I'm going to save link as, I'm just going to put it in my downloads folder, sure. And you can see I've done this a whole bunch. Okay, great. So I'm going to go to that directory, I'm going to go to my downloads directory, and it's a zip file. Now I'm on Windows. If I double click it on Windows, it looks like it's prompting, it's opening up a file. If you double click it on a Mac, it'll unpack right in the folder that you're in. I'm just going to use the Windows extract here to extract to where it's at. So what I'm going to find is that once I've extracted it, now I've got this file called listings, and in it is everything from that grid in a messy, comma-separated values format. Oh, that's not very useful. But where exports are going to be useful for you is where you can load them inside other applications. Probably lots of you use Google, so you're familiar with maybe Google Sheets. I bet a number of you are Microsoft users, and so you may have access to a program called Excel. And so we're a Microsoft shop here at the association. So I'm going to open up a blank workbook using Excel, and I'm going to show you the basics of working with data. And again, I'm not going to do a super deep dive here. I just want to show you what's possible with your data. So I'm going to pull the data in using data, get data from text. I'm going to go to my download directory once it shows me a file prompt. And where is it? Downloads, and there it is. And there's my file. I'm going to import that data from text, and watch this. Excel knows that I'm working with tab separated data. So it just says, hey, I think that if I structure the data like this, it should load right. And you just say load. And now it's loaded all the data from the file. And one of the things that Excel and things like Google Sheets will do, and if you're on a Mac and you're just using, I think it's called Calc on the, or I might have Calc in Sheets backwards for Mac and Google. But my point is that you can load it in your application of choice. And now you can do things like searching or bracketing or sorting on any of these columns, all become possible now just by using the powers of your spreadsheet tool, whatever your spreadsheet tool is. So in this case, maybe I care about, price per square foot. So I'm just going to sort that one by smallest to largest. And now you can see that I've sorted all the data. Of course, because I can sort data, I can also filter data. So nothing would stop me from saying, since it's numeric, you can do greater than or equal to. So the magic here is that even though your MLS system may not be all powerful, although it's pretty powerful, you can take your data that you're getting in your results here and you can export it out into a way that you can work in other applications. And that really opens the doors for you to do crazy, powerful things. I've seen agents use this export format where they'll export every week, maybe all the listings in a district. And then they have their own spreadsheet tool that does graphing to build tables and charts. So a lot can be done there. And I think what we might do is we might consider recording a shorter class that just shows you, how to leverage data sets in a spreadsheet tool. But what I would do is I would have exported the data and then I would have looked for the column that had those unit costs. And that's how I would have done it. I would have filtered the data based on the value in the column I care about in the export. You can't search on it, but you can export all the data that exists into a spreadsheet, and then you can do your searching and refining of your details there. And so hopefully that'll help you get started with working with data exports. And as I say, we're considering doing a more deep dive on actually generating graphs and all that.
Yeah, I love that idea, Jay. I was just going to say, watching this and seeing how much more you can dive into the data. And I'm just happy that people hung in there on that data deep dive. Impressive that people stuck around for some of that more advanced stuff. Because, once you start thinking about importing and exporting, it can get complicated for some folks. But I love the idea of doing a little more deep dive into that as well.
The last thing I'll say about exports is that if you have an option, you can see here I'm in the admin menu and I'm going to go down to custom export setup. I can define my own custom export setups, and you can do this too if you ask us. This feature is very powerful because it enables you to go in and configure your own exports based on what columns matter to your business. So you could go in and define your own exports, but it is not turned on by default because it is powerful and requires a little extra. You should have seen a demo like we're doing today before you tackle it. So if you would like this feature turned on for you to create your own export formats, please email the team at MLS@sfrealtors.com and say, hi, I'd like to enable custom export, and we'll get that enabled for you so that you can go under admin and you can define your own export format. And specifically in cases like residential income, maybe that's something where you'd want to create your own export that exports all the columns that are really relevant to residential income properties. You'd want to build your own custom export for that because that's not typical. And just email us if you'd like that feature turned on.
And I'll say real quick, Jay, while you're on this page, is that in general, if you'd like to get started with exports and you'd like to see how they work, I'd recommend trying out the system basic listing export. You'll see that automatically whether or not you have your own custom exports, and that shows for all of the property types, and it has a nice CSV format to download. Yeah, perfect. So system basic listing with export. Yeah, perfect. And so that actually just goes out and spits out a zip file. You can download the zip file, and then it shows on your side, once you unzip that file, all of that data. We configured this export for agents in mind to get a general sense of the listings in their search. And that actually opens up right into Excel without any of the legwork, and it just works directly from Excel. And so that's one of them. And then the data analysis export is one that I made. It's just for residential only, but it's also a useful export to use on your end.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Patrick.
Yeah.
Well, we'll do a follow-up on this. I think we've established that we've only really scratched the surface of how powerful the MLS system can be. Inside the PDF of the outline for today's class, you'll see that there's a section on the last page called Beyond This Training Session. There's some great links in there that'll tell you things like how to work with Excel a little bit, how to do screenshots. We use tools like GreenShot here at the association that lets us do screen captures. So there's some links there for some great software to download and some guides to things like how would I use that embeddable code that Patrick showed you? Can I do something with it? And there's some guides there that show you simple HTML tricks to use that embeddable code right away on your own blog or perhaps other agent website you've got. Awesome. I think that concludes the content that we have today. We'll keep the channel open for a little bit, but it's been fantastic with you all here today, going over, really advanced search strategies and techniques and the built-in tools, and then Patrick's deep dive for InfoSparks and exports. It was great to have everyone here.